Hello everyone and welcome back to the Retro Recall. I hope you're doing awesome. Today we have two unbranded desktop PCs on the bench. These two systems were part of that donation from Carl. Carl, thank you so much for donating these PCs and that entire drop to the Retro Recall. Really appreciate it. If you haven't checked the last video I featured two notebook PCs that were dropped off as part of that donation. So thank you so much, Carl, again for doing so. I call these unbranded because I don't see a brand name on these computers, but the confusing part of it, they don't look custom either. When I say custom is, I was very much a custom builder during my early 90s and 2000s. I was building systems from custom desktop and custom tower cases with all the different random components and adding things in. Now, it does give me some of those vibes, definitely with the optical drives and what have you, but the actual design of the case itself really gives me pause, where I feel like these should be an OEM of some sort. So today we're going to go over these two systems, find out what the heck they are, find out if they even post, and see what we can do with them. So we have lots to do as always. Let's get right to it. And welcome back, and here we are with system number one. Now, I mean, everybody who's watched the channel understands the process we follow on these. This time we only have the two systems because they are identical, and again, being unbranded and just in such great condition, I really wanted to go over them together. That said, I know the two systems look identical. I don't know if they are, so we are going to go over each system individually, as sometimes you may find different components depending on the configuration of the system. So for example, this first computer has the Core 2 Duo CPU case badge on the front, and the other one didn't. Now, it could be just easily removed or never put on, or could have a different configuration. So that's why I go over these. Now, this PC really reminds me of that TangentPC that we did a while ago in that video right there. That PC was designed to be in like medical institutions and things like that that required much more microbial type coatings on the surfaces of the machine to prevent the spread of infection and things like that. So it was quite interesting that that was used for medical use. Now, the reason I say that is because it is very, very deep and has the same type of fan configuration on the side. So again, very, very similar to that configuration, but yet I don't see TangentPC written anywhere on here where the other one was clearly branded. On the front, looks like we have a 3.5-inch floppy or say card reader expansion area that we could potentially expand into. We have a 1394 FireWire connection, two USB connections, which are probably USB 2. And we also have two front audio jacks. Very convenient, of course, having the jacks in the front. Along the top, we do have a DVD-RW Super Multi drive. It is just a standard optical drive of the time. Along the front bottom, we have this interesting kind of wire mesh design. I really like that look, as well as provides quite a bit of ventilation in this area. And then we have the Core 2 Duo inside case badge with some buttons along the front. So it looks like a reset button, a hard drive LED, power LED, and our power button, all conveniently located in the front. And of course, continues on over here. Now, I'm rubbing my finger along this metal grate and it kind of stops here, it catches here, because there's some residue, some sticker residue that's here. So I'm wondering if there was another case badge that was for potentially like designed for Windows X, for example. So again, not knowing, or maybe there was a manufacturer on the front of it. I'm not sure. So we have two additional ventilation ports that we see. We see here that we don't have anything populated, but there's more of a kind of like a mesh, like a kind of like a screen type of material in behind this honeycomb design. So it'd be interesting to open that up and see what is behind there. But it carries on the top as well. So my guess is that's where the CPU is for additional ventilation, which is always good to have. And then along the top, we do have a sticker along the top. So it says here, this is your VGA connection, and this is the DVI connection in 1394. So it gives us our port layout or IO layout of the back panel. And this is why I continue to say, I think this is an OEM branded PC, but it's not branded. So that's quite interesting. Okay, along the back, there it is, sure enough, living true to the port design we have on the top. We have our VGA, DVI, another 1394 connection, because we have one in the front. We have 6 additional USB ports, making it 8 in total, an integrated NIC, 3 additional audio jacks, and it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 expansion ports. And because this is low profile, so you'd have to find any expansion that you'd have to do with this, we'd have to make sure you find low profile cards that would fit this particular system. And of course we have our PSU, which looks like to be proprietary for this particular case design. And along the back, and here we go. So I think our mystery has been solved, because again, I am looking at this for the first time just as you are. So it looks like along the back we have MDG Computers Canada, MDG Prism GX6750i. So MDG is a line of computers that were up here in Canada that you could order online, and you know, like the $1 a day computers was one of their mottos. Just pay $1 a day and you get a computer. I'm not sure if they had any affiliation with Tangent, for example, but this is very, very similar in design, if not almost identical. So again, that's interesting to see that it is an OEM based PC. If you classify MDG as an OEM, I mean, I would, just because they were very predominant in the market for several years before they no longer were in operation. So I'll have to look into that and find out what happened to them. Okay, going along the other side, we have additional ventilation, which does look like it is populated with a fan. And of course, you know, again, all the signs were there and I didn't see it because, quite frankly, like I said, I didn't do anything with these systems until I got them in hand. But we have Windows Vista Business, so it gives you an idea of what operating system potentially is on this system or came with this computer. And of course, we have the MDG logo directly printed on the Microsoft license. So they were working with Microsoft directly to resell the operating system as part of their PC configurations. So here we are, we have our answer. It's an MDG computer, but again, not knowing what it was until we started down this journey. Okay, let's open up the computer and take a look at the system itself. It doesn't look like there are any screws along the back that I need to worry about, but there is this little thumb, kind of IBM branded blue along the back. So there we go. We'll open that up. And there is the case. And welcome back with a different view of the system. Now, before we move on to talk about what's inside this desktop, I do want to mention that I did look up MDG and they are apparently still in business. It tells you how in touch I am. I just remember the MDG commercials of the day and kind of washed my mind of them since then. And here we are. We have an MDG system on the bench after all these years. Okay, and first off, we have our Intel branded OEM cooler for our CPU. We have a heatsink on top of the chipset. We have our 4-pin power powering our CPU. We have our rear I/O all nicely nestled inside here, and we also have a bunch of expansion. So along our expansion, we do have a PCI Express 16 lane, a 1 lane, another 1 lane, and of course our PCI. And over here, we still have Legacy IDE, which is absolutely amazing. I love these type of compatible boards that have the PCI Express 16. You have your 1, which is fine for all your compatibility for your newer stuff, but you also have PCI and of course IDE. We have a few more headers along the bottom for additional USB expansion, depending on what the board would support, depending on what the chassis would support and require. We do have 4 slots for memory. Let's just pop one of them out just to see what we have populated. And it looks like we have 2 gigabytes of Kingston memory installed. Now, I'm not going to take every one of them out just to see how much we have. We can figure that out as we turn on the system if it posts, and we can go from there. Generally, when you start to disrupt some of these things, you can, without using contact cleaner and stuff, they won't post. Okay, we do have our CR2032 battery. It doesn't look like we have a date code on it. Usually I have a date code that shows the expiry of the battery. Give us just an idea. We do have a proprietary PSU sitting over here, all nestled in the corner. Again, proprietary because of the case design. again, I think I have a couple of these from that Tangent PC. So interesting, just the design of this and the just the space and everything. It just really feels like a Tangent PC, to be honest. I don't know if MDG made them or the company made the chassis for MDG and Tangent and what have you, and maybe other manufacturers. So over here in the corner, we do have a populated fan, a case fan. So it's nice to have those. I mean, we do have a lot of different spaces we could put fans. There's an extra fan header on the motherboard. I do have this mesh over here I talked about earlier. It looked like screening. And of course, that is in the CPU area. So we do have the top cover that goes on the chassis, slides right in and allows for ventilation for the CPU. But we also have another area here, a bit dirty. So it is pulling some air through that, but that's probably why the screen is there, so it catches additional dirt, because you can see that on there. Let's get into a little more of the nit and gritty. I do want to talk about the capacitors. So this wasn't part of the capacitor plague per se, but it's always good to check out the capacitors to see what kind of condition they're in, see if they're bulging, see if there's any sort of deformities along them as you go. Maybe any damage, was this worked on? I mean, this system was theoretically thrown to e-waste, so I always like to check those things to see, why was this system tossed? Obviously, based on the condition I'm seeing so far, I think it was just tossed because of end of life, but here we are. So it does say Intel desktop board written on the silk screen. It does show a model number of E210882. So Intel desktop board E210882. Interesting. Using these sort of components. I mean, for me, when I built custom PCs, I would definitely go and grab a bunch of different manufacturer boards, different memory, different optical drives, things like that. That's how I kind of built them. But, the fact that MDG did all that for you, and here we are. Okay, let's look at the front of the system for a moment and access this area to see what else we can see. So along the front, we have the 3 tabs that are holding on the front bezel. I'm just going to pop those off. Very similar to some of the small form factor PCs. Very simple to remove and very easy to clean. There's a lot to be said about this design. And it says a little handle, I guess you can pull up, but it's kind of down. It says here, remove the bezel before taking off the cage. So we've already done that, but I am seeing a couple screws along the front that are exposed because of the removal of the bezel. Let's just get those removed to see if they're kind of holding this down. Yeah, okay, sure enough. So we have that open now. So we get a different view again. Interesting. So we have our optical drive, which is IDE, sure enough, no IDE cable. But we do have that populated. We have our 3.5-inch bay sitting over here. This is our 5.25-inch drive housing for our spinning rust hard disk if you wanted to put one in. I do like the fact that this is all a toolless design. I personally like this design. Not a lot of people do because they, for different reasons, I'll say, but I personally like this, especially when you're working on these quite a bit. And if these were mass produced, say if you order these for a business, for example, especially the Tangent line, because they were meant for business PCs, you would see a lot of this sort of design, so it's easy for the technicians to work on it. I do like this though. I mean, it looks like there's an SSD caddy sitting over on this side. You just move that, slide it out, and boom, you can pop in an SSD and put it back in, and fully accessible to the cabling and everything that you require. Okay, let's see what else on the motherboard we missed as a result of that being down on top. So let's see, we have all of our, it doesn't matter what design you get into, power cables are just always everywhere. Okay, so I do see the front connector, the front header removed from the motherboard. I do see one of them removed. Do we have other? Yeah, so we have a couple removed. So I did mention already that on the back of the motherboard, we do have a couple of headers that are unpopulated, but it looks like we do have those headers. So I think we're going to need them plugged in order to be able to power up the system. But I am seeing regular Molex, but also the SATA connectivity for power, but also we have the same for the data connection. So it's nice to have that SATA connectivity. And of course, we could pop in a SATA drive, which gives us a lot of expansion capabilities here as well. Okay, so I'm going to get those plugged in, and we're going to flip this all around, get a keyboard, mouse, monitor, all that stuff on the bench, and we'll see if the system will post. And here we are with everything all set up, and it automatically started the system immediately. As soon as I plugged that power cable in, it booted directly into the screen. That's one of my annoyances when it comes to these sort of systems. Dells are like that, odd Lenovo's are like that, where you literally plug the power in, doesn't matter what you have going on, it just boots the system up and it will continue to boot if you plug it in. So I don't like that feature. I like to be able to plug in the power and then hit that power button to go forward. I have it in kind of a tower configuration at the moment just for space, but obviously this is designed to be in a desktop configuration. Okay, so the firmware has detected that a CMOS battery failure occurred. Press enter key to continue, and it tells me that a second time. Keyboard looks like the unlock key is lit up. Hit enter to continue, and it says the firmware has detected that a CMOS checksum error has occurred. Press to continue, which we know because there's no power to the battery. And it also says that, hey, the date and time has not been set. Wow, they really want you to acknowledge every sentence that they state here. Okay, we get it, computer. The CMOS battery is not working. All right, hit enter again. And it says E7940. I imagine these are postcodes. It says no bootable device. Insert boot disk and press any key. Okay, so I will say I did populate the system because I already had it apart and on the bench before I started recording with a 160 gigabyte Western Digital drive that I had, a SATA drive, just to see if it detects a drive. Okay, so the fact that we don't have it there, it's fine. Let's do Control-Delete. Let's see if we can get into some sort of BIOS or setup utility. Okay, so we have system setup. It says main advanced security power boot Intel ME and exit. So we're going to go over those in a moment. So we have BIOS version in long string of codes, but I do see 2009. I don't know if that's our date code. That's the only thing relevant to a date that I see in the string. We have processor type is our Intel Core 2 Duo E6750, 2.66 gigahertz, Intel 64 architecture capable. Core multiplexing technology is enabled, processor speed, system bus speed, as well as our memory speed. So L2 cache is 4 megabytes of L2, total memory is 8 gigabytes running in dual channel mode. Really, really nice. Again, a system that is tossed to e-waste, and here we are. We have a perfectly working, posting at least, system with a Core 2 Duo system with 8 gigabytes of memory. I just love when these things come to play. So here we are with our system date and time, which is just reset, of course, because of the fact that the CMOS battery is dead. Remember, it warned us 3 times. Okay, under advanced, let's see what we have. We have boot configuration, pretty straightforward, nothing fancy. Peripheral configuration, serial port, audio, onboard LAN. You can go in. These are all disabled currently, but you can go in and re-enable them if you want. And our TPM is enabled. Under our drive configuration, I'm seeing the 6 SATA ports with our Western Digital 160 gigabyte drive populated. Under configure SATA as AHCI, we can change that to IDE or RAID. Nice to have a RAID configuration ability within the system. Not all setup utilities have that, so it's good. Event log configuration, video configuration. So we have 128 megabytes of memory that's been assigned to integrated graphics. This system would really benefit, I think, from a dedicated graphics card for sure. Fan control, it's under normal. I mean, you can go in and set these settings depending on how you want the system to operate. Okay, we have our hardware monitoring. Our CPU die package temperature is running at 46 degrees Celsius. Now, somebody mentioned to me in the comments down below from a previous post, you know, every time they get any system, the first thing they do before they power it up is replace the thermal paste. I don't. I just don't. Remember, I think I made this in the comment, and if not, here we are. I don't replace the thermal paste because these particular systems are given to me from e-waste, okay? These are already destined for the recyclers, trash, and I get a lot of systems that you don't see on the channel that are, you know, in very rough shape, and I don't even accept some of them. And to be honest with you, I just use them for components. But when they're in decent shape or okay shape, or a shape that I feel confident enough that they're gonna at least get to a position where we can restore them, I will replace that thermal paste as part of the restoration video. I'm not going through the whole process of taking it all apart, replacing the paste, removing the paste, etc. You see that in the restoration video. Anybody who's watched the channel long enough knows I do that during those types of videos. So under here, it gives our basically our motherboard temperature, which I think is really cool to see that, not just the CPU, but also the motherboard and the system temperature. Also gives our rails, so we have 12 volt, 5 volt, our standby battery, 3.3 volts. And yeah, so everything's there, and it's nice to see the voltages are within spec. Our CPU cooling fan, it shows our RPMs, chassis inlet fan, and outlet fan. So the outlet fan is not currently populated, but we do have an inlet fan, which is good. We're not going to do much on that. Security is not much to do there either because everything's disabled at the moment. Under power, it gives our power settings. You can go in and have the computer behave in certain ways. After power failure, you know, we do want to do your last state, wake on LAN, etc. Under our boot configuration, we have our boot menu is normal. So right now we have our hard drive orders. You can go in here and you can tell it how to boot. Do you want to do it from a floppy disk or legacy options, USB? So if you're having trouble booting from any of these things, you can go into this particular setup screen and configure it properly. And right now it's just set to boot from the hard disk, which of course is wiped. There's no operating system on there currently. And then we have exit, so exit saving changes and all our standard stuff. And here we are with our fully working Intel Core 2 Duo running at 2.66 gigahertz and 8 gigs of RAM, and all that expansion on the board. The only limitation I really see is the low profile design, specifically for expansion cards. It's really good for space saving. This particular chassis has great ventilation, really well equipped, really a lot of really good compatibility on the motherboard and what it can support, and a lot of great configuration. Intel boards are really known for that. Unfortunately, due to that low profile size, to get the proper cards to be able to fit that design, it becomes a little more challenging. So it's not impossible, but it just, again, becomes more challenging. And finding older hardware is already difficult enough, not to mention trying to find hardware that's still around that is low profile. Let's pop on to system number 2. Here we are with system number 2, and as I mentioned earlier, it looked like they were identical systems, so we have 2 of a good thing. We're just going to go over it real quickly just to be absolutely sure they are the same, and we'll open up inside to make sure the condition is good and see what goodies lie inside. And we have a 3.5-inch bay. It doesn't look populated again. We have a 1394 connection, 2 USB and 2 front audio jacks. Ventilation, this time we don't have any sticker on the front, and this time I'm also not feeling any residue this time. So interesting that we don't have that. Another optical drive, as again, a super multi-drive, slightly different than the other one we had in the other system. However, the configuration's identical on the front in terms of the reset power and the LEDs. On this side of the chassis, we do have our 2 ventilation fans. We also still have that felt in behind. It looks like we do have a CPU populated, which is great. Just like the other system, we do have that sticker showing all the rear I/O with all the different names of the ports, and we love ports on this channel. And along, speaking of ports, we have our DVI, VGA, 6 USB again, 1394. Everything's identical on this system. A little latch here that we know opens up the cover. We have our 4 expansion bays. This time we don't have any of the covers installed, so I wonder if this was fully populated at some point. And we have our PSU. And along the other side, again, we do have the fan that is populated, and we also have our, oh, this time it shows a little different. So the other one said Windows Vista Business. This one here said Windows 7 Professional, MDG. So we do have a slightly different operating system that would have been installed in this system. So does that mean that this was different hardware? We're going to find out here in a moment. Let's open up the chassis and get a different view. Okay, here we are with our bird's eye view, and the system is looking very similar. So we do have an aftermarket this time CPU cooler. So we have our cooler master installed. Our back I/O, our rear I/O, I should say, is there. We have our heatsink on our chipset. Nothing has changed. It is still an Intel desktop board, E210882. I'm looking here, we do have a 16, 1X, and 1X PCIe, and of course we have our PCI. This time we do have the headers plugged in, well at least one of them has been, and our legacy IDE port is down inside. We do have that on this board as well. Our proprietary PSU with our case fan also installed. Let's take a look at the front here. Let's take off this bezel as we did in the last system. And that should give us now access. There we go. Pretty good. So this time we have a SATA optical drive. Last time, if you remember, we did have the IDE. We still have our drive cages, which are populated, by the way. Sometimes you get these systems where these blue adapters are gone. So having them populated makes this much more easier to populate if we need to. And for our drive, we have our 3.5-inch drive would go here, as well as our 2.5-inch. And I think earlier I was actually talking about this drive earlier, and I think I called it a 5.25. So my bad, I'll make that note during editing. Okay, so I'm going along and we have our SATA connectivity, our legacy IDE, as we talked about earlier. Everything's pretty straightforward. So one thing I noticed about this system that the other system didn't have is on the cover, it actually has this case sticker on it, which is wonderful because it really gives you all the different pinouts and the voltages and all the different layout of the motherboard. Now it says DQ35J0 Intel. So I don't know if that motherboard number is correct or this this number is correct as a model. I'll have to look that up to be absolutely sure, but I'm sure the RetroWeb has a lot of this information stored. So I didn't talk about the memory. So it does look like we do have our 4 memory bays, but it looks like this time only 2 are populated. So we do have, it looks like 2 gigabytes of memory as well in this system. So I imagine this one's probably populated with the 4 gigabytes of memory versus the 8 that we had in the other system. Okay, I think we're in a good position. I don't want to harp on this anymore. All the capacitors I've been looking as I've been speaking here all look to be in good shape. None look bent or moved around or leaking or anything like that from first glance. So we're going to turn everything around and see if we can get this system posting. Here we are back with system number 2, and this time we don't know. It's not branded, obviously. We talked about that earlier, but it is an MDG as well. We saw that in the sticker in the back of this system, plus they're basically identical systems. I don't know what it is in terms of CPU, but if logic dictates, it's probably a Core 2 Duo as well. And like I said before, the other system showed Windows Vista Business, while this one shows Windows 7 Professional on it. Now, again, like I did with the other system, I did install a 3.5-inch platter drive. It was a 7200 RPM, 160 gigabyte drive. This time I do think it was a Seagate hard disk that I installed, but we'll see that in a moment. And of course, we have everything set up. But the one thing to note, this time I plugged it in and it didn't do the same thing as it did before. It didn't try to boot into anything. So I did see it power up and power down. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but hey, let's hit the power button and see what happens. Okay, so far so good. It looks like it's trying to boot. Let's see if it gives us any errors this time. Last time it gave us the angry CMOS errors that it didn't like that the battery was not wasn't powered. Okay, I'm getting it looks like I'm getting posts this time. I think those are the Intel boot codes. Yeah, so it just went right to it can't find an operating system. Okay, so it's much faster this time. So obviously the coin cell does have some juice left in it. Okay, so we are into the setup screen. Again, I don't know if it's escape, delete, enter, F1. One of them works. So here we are. Okay, again, we have the same BIOS version by the looks of things with 2009 as a date code. It'd be interesting to see if this motherboard has an updated BIOS available. Now, someone else, and keep me honest in the comments, someone else had mentioned, do you update the BIOSes on every single one of your systems? And the answer is no. I don't do it all the time. I look at the release notes. I look at the benefits that it would give me. If I'm not requiring additional CPU support, additional memory support, or different features for these particular systems, I don't really look for trouble if it's not there, if that makes sense. Because if you end up flashing the BIOS, especially in an older system, it's a chance the BIOS will be bad during the flashing process. So I don't like to take that risk unless I absolutely have to. I mean, yes, there's ways to correct that if it does go bad, but it's just one of those things I just don't want to put on my plate unless I absolutely am requiring a particular feature that the updated BIOS will provide. Okay, so processor type is an Intel Core 2 Duo CPU E6750, 2.66 gigahertz, same as the other computer, same stats, except this time we are running dual channel 4 gigabytes of memory. We do not have the other 2 bays populated this time. The date is holding true. It's September 6th, 8 p.m. here locally. So it is pretty cool that it is showing the date and is holding the date configuration there. Under our advanced, we've already gone through these setup specifically, the boot configuration, all that fun stuff. Let's go into hardware monitoring real quickly, just see what we have. So we are running 42 degrees C for our CPU. Our voltages all look good as well. That's why I wanted to put this on. I am seeing the CPU cooling fan is running very, very slowly. It must be, the smart fan must be enabled in order for that to be running that slowly, because the other one was just running full tilt. Remember, we did not have a CMOS battery saving settings. It was all set to default. So obviously this computer is already being configured in such a way that that's where that's been configured. And our chassis inlet fan, which we know is populated, yeah, so I'm not getting any airflow from that. So it'll be interesting to see if that fan has just been disconnected or it truly is a bad fan. So that's something we'd have to look into as well. But that's why I wanted to take a look at this screen. Okay, in this particular computer, we didn't do this in the other computer, but I'm going to put in Knoppix because I want to see if the system will actually boot into an operating system to support an operating system. So I have Knoppix 9.1. I'm going to put it in and see if we can get the live environment up and running. Okay, so here we are booting into Knoppix 9.1 with 4 gigabytes of memory partially shared with the integrated graphics. Showing our Intel Core 2 dual CPU running at 2.6 gigahertz, no problem. Our Intel Corporation 82Q35 Express integrated graphics. That's what we have installed. It's continuing to detect drivers, and we'll see if we can boot into the desktop. Okay, here we are booted directly to the Knoppix desktop without any issues, and these all run very quickly, even in the live environment. This is such a quick system. Again, such a shame that these are tossed every day to e-waste. And here we are, another example of a system that we can resurrect and restore into a fully working system. Okay, now that this is up and running, we know that it works. We now have system number 2 operational without an issue. And I'm going to stop there just because we do have the two systems up and running. We know the configurations of them. Let's go to our outro. And here we are at the end of the video with our 2 unbranded OEM systems, MDG Prism computers from, well, MDG. And I'll be honest with you, I have not owned any MDGs in my collection. It is something I've seen quite a bit over the years, as I mentioned earlier, the advertisements online and things like that. Just not a system I ever went for, but it seems like they had taken some custom components and built systems for the end user, and still, even today, are in business doing similar things. Of course, they've broadened their product base. But our first system, with being a Core 2 Duo running at 2.6 gigahertz with our 8 gigabytes of memory and our multi-core optical drive. No hard disk. I did put a 160 gigabyte hard disk in there just to make sure that the controller was working, and we saw that. Now, I did not boot to Knoppix on this system because I figured I was going to do it on the second one, but it was running pretty stable. It's always good practice to do that so it can install the drivers and make sure that, you know, the integrated graphics, the sound, things like that are all operational, and it can support a system in a live environment. I'm very happy to see the design of these. Again, I loved that TangentPC, the medical PC we did a video on. I love the configuration and the design of that chassis. Plus, it just feels so robust, the build of the chassis itself. And this is no exception. I am very hard pressed to think that they were made from different manufacturers, because outside of the bezel being a slightly different design on the front, it just clips on and off. But the actual main chassis itself feels like the exact same design with very, very similar outlets for ventilation. So again, I think they're pretty close to the same manufacturer. And the bottom one is a Core 2 Duo as well. Similar spec system, Intel motherboards in both. That, of course, came with the 4 gigabytes of memory. No hard disk. We installed a 160 gigabyte drive as well. A Seagate one this time. But we did boot to Knoppix 9.1 live environment just to make sure it was operational. Now, again, the sticker, you know, the OEM stickers on it, the license keys show that this one came with Windows Vista Business, while this one came with Windows 7 Professional. So both were probably used in some sort of business environment. That Core 2 Duo CPU for me seems like kind of like that really nice sweet spot, even for systems today that I'm restoring, that you can still bring these systems online today with a newer operating system, say a Linux distribution, no problem. Heck, you can run Windows 10 on this, no problem. Windows 11, I'm sure there's some modifications to make that work, but I mean, again, Windows 10 should not have any issues running with a Core 2 Duo, especially with 8 gigabytes of memory. And if you switch the hard disks out from the platter drives I've installed to SSDs, again, you're off to the races, no problem running that. And a lot of people say, well, why would you even bother doing that with the new computers? And you know, some other views say, hey, you know, these systems aren't that old, but at the end of the day, it's up to the consumer to say, okay, this system is no longer working for me. And that's the problem today, in my opinion, is that these systems get thrown out way too early. Arguably, you can still do a lot with these computers. It has still a lot of the expansion that you require with the PCI 16 lane, as well as the ones and the legacy PCI. If you want to go backwards a little bit and install Vista Business or Ultimate on one of them and Windows 7 Pro on another, just to kind of get that nostalgic feeling, as well as some of the older software applications that you can run back in the day. But overall, these systems are in absolutely excellent condition. I really want to hear from you in the comments what you feel we should do with these two systems. Being unbranded OEM systems, I think that's pretty darn neat. And again, something else to add to the Retro Recall collection. That said, if you like today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Tells YouTube you like what you're seeing, helps this channel grow, helps the algorithm them, recommend the channel and these videos. Hit the notification button, change it to all. You'll be notified of new content such as this. Please leave a comment down below. What should we do with these systems? Have you ever owned MDG systems in your household or business? Or have you actually had these systems specifically? I love to hear the comments. I respond to absolutely every one of them. Love the interaction on this channel. Always making new content. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.